It's a preferred design plan, is that correct?
Preliminary design program.
All right, I got two options. By our OCM, Alan Minkus, and architect from Jones and Winsett. So, take it away.
Were there minutes that needed to be approved from any other meeting or on a previous thing? Or?
I didn't take them, and I don't have them.
Okay. I mean, it will be something that MSBA is going to be looking at, and when we do submissions that we do have to have the minutes, and they're going to look for the fact that these things are documented. So it's something that,
I sent the minutes out, but obviously we got caught up in the holidays, so
yeah.
paper, but.
All right.
Understood. I just didn't want it to start slipping, and all of a sudden the checklist becomes something that we don't face. First thing I have in front of you is a schedule. It's just an update as to where we are. It looks like this, if you will, with the colors, and everything's got a lot of colors on tonight. But you can see in the process, we're now in the feasibility study phase that the architects and design team have been working diligently to studying the educational program and studying the existing conditions here and evaluating and the site development requirements and so forth. And we're just about to submit on January 16th the PDP, the preliminary design program, to the MSBA, which is what we're going to be reviewing tonight with you in this presentation. So you can see where we are. We're about almost halfway through the process with going for local approvals on the schematic design. So we're holding to the schedule, which is good, and there's not much more to talk about schedule-wise. So with that, I'd like to turn it over to Jones Winsett and let them talk about what they've been doing in the last few months.
Great.
Better.
That's great. Great. Hope everybody had a good New Year's. Good to see everybody. The agenda for tonight is pretty straightforward. It's to go through what we will be presenting to the MSBA, which is our preliminary design program. It'll be a binder like this. This is our draft that we started in our office. We're starting to populate it with all of the reports from our consultants and ourselves. There'll be a lot more drawings in here and spreadsheets that we're going to go over tonight. So we'll try and do basically a summary of what is going in this binder and what's being submitted to the MSBA. What we're looking for is approval from the committee on the 7 options that we're presenting to the MSBA. A general approval on our approach that we're taking with the space summary that's listing all the square footages of the various rooms in the building and the overall gross square footage of the building. And to think about, we're going to present some very, very rough project cost numbers. This makes us very nervous to do this early in the process. It might make the OPM even more nervous than the architects. But it's to start. This is a broad look at very initial project cost to see if one option has a significant swing in cost versus another. So we're not looking at the price of a toilet times how many toilets are going to be in the school or anything along those lines, but thinking about very broad-based costs. The first thing that we cover in the report is the educational program. And a significant portion of this will come from the school district. Basically, the MSBA wants to make sure that it is, in fact, the school district that's informing the architects to build the building in a certain manner or to lay out the space summary in a certain manner. The agenda should be driven by the school district. The agenda should not be driven by the architect or the OPM. And so another part of that is something our educational planner also presents his findings. His name's Frank Locker. He's a consultant that we've used many times before. Really pretty well thought of in his field. He came for 2 sessions with Isabelina and Deb, and and Tom was there as well. There's about 18 or so. Some teachers and some administrative staff. It was really pretty helpful from both schools, right? We all met here, so some pictures from the day. Frank Locker really likes to use flip charts. He's up here writing notes. He's a very energetic guy, so he's bouncing around the room. Introducing ideas, a lot of concepts on 21st century learning, and seeing, which direction the district wants to take this new school. So part of that was looking at, he'd pass out these questionnaires asking, are you interested in direct teaching or lecturing, interdisciplinary learning, after he's kind of introduced a lot of these concepts, then going around and having the participants vote on what they find is most important. Going back to this slide, we went out into the hallway and posted colored dots on the concepts that people felt most strongly about. And there were 3 clear winners, or clear directions that they want to go. That there's a strong, people were very interested in teacher collaboration and supporting teacher collaboration, small group collaboration, more at the student level, and also really supporting social and emotional learning. And so then, taking kind of those concepts, Frank presented a bunch of options, a bunch of precedents across the country, and even some from Norway and Japan and Mexico, and had everyone kind of vote on their favorites and describe why they picked their favorites. And it was divided into 2 groups. It was pretty interesting. So there's 2 individual tables, and then myself and Helen from our office and Alan were at another table. So we had 1 table of just professionals and then 2 tables of teachers and administrative staff. And each group was charged with picking their 3 favorites, and it was pretty remarkable that all 3 groups picked the same 3 projects, which I've never seen happen before. So that was pretty great. So the first one up here is the Springfield Literacy Center, and people really liked, so it's basically 2 classrooms with interstitial space in between and kind of these breakout reading nooks. This school was very much designed around the goal of getting everyone at a high literacy level. So that one was a high favorite. Another one was Trillium Creek Primary School. There's 2 images here. Again, small little nooks in the classroom. We didn't have a good graphic of it, but the plans for some of the classrooms were in kind of an L shape instead of a rectangle. Frank calls them fat L's because there's just one little area that stubs off, but that got a lot of favorable feedback. And then another one is the Blue Point Primary School. And here there's a sliding door between the classrooms that is 90% of the time left open. And the teachers, if they start working well together and they want to, they can start having classes, start having the students go to this classroom for a math intensive time and over here for a language intensive time, and really trying to capitalize on the teacher's strengths and share some responsibilities. From kind of all of that input, Frank came up with this bubble diagram, kind of describing a preferred layout. Not in too much detail, but that classrooms wanted to be grouped into smaller learning communities. And of course that's going to change if we're on a pre-K through 3 grade level or a pre-K through 6. But that a certain amount of classrooms are kind of centered around a common area. There was talk of having potentially 2 different entrances. So one with a school main entry where the students came in, and potentially a separate entrance for a community entrance. Really trying to capitalize on having the community use this as a resource, the gym, the dining area, and the cafeteria, and also potentially the library or the media center, and trying to have that be part of the public realm as well. Another topic that came up was potentially taking some of the square footage out of the library and dividing it throughout the school, and trying to get books not just in the library but between classrooms and maybe in some of those shared spaces or some of those common spaces around that the classrooms are surrounding. So that was kind of some of the overall broad ideas. And later on tonight, once we go through the plans, the 6 options, you'll see some of that represented there.
Christian, just so we're clear on the, for people who might be watching at home,
Yep.
we're not designing a building with 3 towers, right?
3 towers. Yeah, no, we're gonna have circular classrooms and no. This is just to represent adjacencies. You know, that a classroom will be next to another classroom, and that there will be some common spaces.
So people just don't think that we're designing.
Right. No, this is not the floor plan. This is not
A bubble diagram.
Exactly.
The groupings.
I'm going to turn it over to Margot to talk about the space summary templates. We introduced that last time. That's the MSBA kind of method on getting the square footage for the building in general.
Great. Okay, so this is a sort of the kernel of this report. It determines the size of the 2, there are many options, but the 2 main options that we're considering. So the first one is a pre-K through grade 3 school. And if you look, I know this is a little far away, but you can look on your papers in front of you. MSBA recommends for a school of 215 pupils these sizes, the columns to the right. And we've talked with Isabelina and Deb and Tom and the staff, and we modify it a little bit to make it suit your community. So, for example, there are more classrooms, and so the academic space is larger because you don't want to have more than 20 kids in a kindergarten, and you don't want more than 24 in a regular grades 1 through 3 classroom. So we had to compromise between how many classrooms you have now. Your classrooms are undersized, but you have more than what MSBA thinks you should have. But it's partly that their formulas break down at such a small school. I say that to their face. So at any rate, we have 13,600 square feet of academic space. That's the pre-K, kindergarten, and grades 1 through 3 classrooms. And then special ed, the formula from MSBA is for 3,000 square feet. That is almost never achieved. Usually it's much higher. And in this case, we're thinking that it's about 5,000. I do want to say again that Isabelina and her staff haven't had a chance to go through this, item by item, but we think we're in the ballpark at any rate. So SPED here would be 5,000 square feet instead of the 3. There are 2 art and music classes, and here we're actually under what MSBA recommends because we didn't have practice rooms in there. Usually that's for older kids, but we can add them back in if you want. But more or less it's 2 classrooms, so it's the right size. You do get a 6,000 square foot gym. So the gymnasium and phys ed space is exactly what they recommend. It's 6,000 square foot gym plus some storage and an office. Then the media center is a formula based on how many students are in the school, and that's 2,000 square feet. So it's not this big. It's smaller. It's going to be the size of 2 classrooms, unless you want to argue that it should be bigger. Dining and food service is, again, a formula, and the funny thing is the kitchen and the cafeteria become about the same size in a small school like this, so it's a little bit small. Medical, 410 square feet. Administration and guidance, we added an extra office for social worker, so that one's a little bit bigger, 2,135. And then custodial and maintenance is exactly what they recommend. So the total net building area is 38,348, and then you multiply it by a net to gross factor and come up with a final gross size of 53,687. We call it 53,700, roughly. So that's the size of the pre-K through grade 3. Any questions about that?
Well, it's hard to read, but the far column to the right says the guidelines for MSBA, and that's less than what is
Yes.
being proposed. So is that an issue?
Well, that's why they have us submit this PDP early, because this is what they want to understand. And it's not, definitely not an issue if you say that your educational program needs these facilities to actually work. And the special ed program is always, that never conforms to their guidelines, and they don't care. They sort of ship that over to a different department, and the different department looks at the actual functioning programs you have here and approves the spaces you need. And then they're much more likely to give you a little extra academic space than some of the other kinds of spaces.
So there's no issue with like reimbursement if we're 10 or 14,000 more than what they're suggesting. I guess that's
Well,
what I meant.
that's why we submit this now.
Okay.
It gets shaken down and agreed upon,
All right.
and then that goes into the preliminary, the preferred schematic report.
There's generally some pushback and some back and forth. But once you decide on a number for that gross square footage, then that's the number. So it doesn't really affect your reimbursement rate, right? As soon as we arrive at that number, maybe the final number that we arrive at will be 51,000. That reimbursement rate will apply to that entire 51,000.
And at this point in the game, I mean, they were saying that you could build net to gross at 1.22 for this size school, and you can't even get thick enough walls with that kind of multiplier. So we put in our own multiplier, and that a more reasonable one that you need. This list doesn't include mechanical spaces, bathrooms. You need hallways and all those kind of things. So that's also a little bit more generous than they want. But we'd be remiss if we used that multiplier. We'd get a sardine can filled. So that's the size of the pre-K through 3. Then next we have the other sheet has the pre-K through 6 school for 430 pupils, and that comes out to 77,600 gross square feet.
Are these all location neutral
Yes.
at this point?
Yes. Yeah. And you'll see that we look at it on each of them on 2 sites. So here, again, we have a little bit, one more classroom basically. So the academic spaces are 1,000 higher. The special ed is again higher, but very justifiable. Goes from 4,500 to 7,000 square feet. Art and music is a little under. Health and gym is the same. Media center is the same. Now you'll see here it's bigger than in the pre-K through 3 because they have a formula that is per pupil, and you have twice as many kids here. Dining is also bigger for that reason. Medical's a little bit bigger, not much, and administration's a little bit bigger, not much, than the pre-K through 3, and custodial and maintenance is exactly what they recommend. So for the larger school, it's a net square footage of 51,736. In this case, we multiplied by 1.5 to come up with 77,600. Again, this is preliminary, and the multiplier, the net to gross will change a little bit as we go forward, but we want to give ourselves adequate room to work.
I'm surprised the gym is the same size with
I
twice
know.
as many kids.
Well, it's really interesting. I mean, I think that'll become a factor in which way you want to go, because the core facilities, which become your community centers, are the same. Well, the gym is the same. The CAF and the media center are smaller, but the gym,
Not that much.
yeah, not that much.
So what's the rationale though? We have rationale for why there's a bigger cafeteria, but the gym's the same size. I don't understand that.
Well, I think they understand that these are community facilities, and so that's the minimum size for an adult basketball game. So it used to be that elementary schools had 3,000 square foot gyms, like you have here. But now they've agreed that 6,000 gives you a chance to run the kids around more, and it's also usable for all age groups.
Oh, so for the smaller school, they're probably giving you a bigger gym than you need?
Twice the size.
And for this size, it's probably the right size, is that right?
Well, again, even with a smaller school, you'd have adult recreational programs.
yeah.
And you wouldn't want to have a 3,000 square foot
Right.
gym, I don't think.
And we also have the GAA who uses it, and we've got the younger kids as well. And currently, they're having difficulty using our smaller gym.
What's the GA?
The Granby Athletic Association.
Oh, right.
Do you by some chance have the size of our high school gym?
Those are usually bigger. They're,
It's bigger than East Meadow, and I know because.
It is,
Yes,
but I'm wondering whether it's getting,
it has
closer to
four,
the size.
it is larger.
we can figure that out.
I can look into that,
now.
yeah.
Find out.
I don't have it with me.
Right.
thank you.
I do know it's larger.
Any other questions about pre-K through 6? So this is formula driven, and then from here we get our costs and our sizes.
Basically doing a new school.
Yes, yes, yes. And from this new school, we backed off to do ad renos. But we're not presenting that tonight. That'll be in the report. We have variations for it. Okay.
So I'll go through this fairly quickly. You know, we get reports from our consultants that are this thick, and then we condense them into one slide, and then it still seems like a bit too much for tonight. But very quickly going through the existing conditions, we looked at the existing conditions at both West Street and East Meadow because both are involved in the potential options going forward. Existing plans of the West Street Elementary School. Here we are in the library over here. Main entrance in red and kind of secondary entrances in blue. Looking at it in terms of the existing spaces versus the MSBA guidelines on the recommended sizes. Wow, those colors didn't come out very well. I'm sorry about that. Orange, which is down here and here and here, is just slightly under MSBA guidelines. And then red is where it's greater than 25% under MSBA guidelines. So that's administration is, I think, maybe 75% under administration or MSBA guidelines. Kitchen is much smaller than what it, quote unquote, should be. Your gym is half of what it should be. The stage is smaller. And I think there's one more on the right there, which is a pre-K classroom. Is more than 25% under, the guidelines. A quick summary of our consultants coming through. They came through largely over the Christmas and holiday break. We still have reports coming in for hazardous materials. That's happening this week, so we don't have findings on that yet. But for the most part, we've got the bulk of these reports in. A few lingering questions that our consultants will be reaching out to the district for. But West Street, the original building is 74 years old, so the original building is where we are now, right in here. It's about 74 years old, and then there were two additions, one in the front here, and then this wing later on in 56. The big issue with West Street is that both a new well and new septic are needed. The well is located in the parking lot, pretty much right outside of the school, and it's on the state, knows that it's a non-conforming well. Our civil engineer felt pretty strongly that even if you just brought this building up to code, if the state saw that you were putting that much money into this building, they would want you to deal with that well. It's non-conforming, and it's significantly non-conforming. The site concrete requires repair. Accessibility is non-compliant, so the only accessible entrance is in the back of the building. Building envelope, everybody knows this, I'm sure, by now, but you know, the walls are not insulated, the doors and the windows are old, a lot of the windows are single pane. Accessibility, there's a lot of problems. The lift that they have now is actually non-compliant. There's a lot of door widths that are too small. There's a lot of push-pull clearances that are not up to code. All of the plumbing fixtures are non-ADA compliant.
Excuse me.
Yep,
Will you be sending us email copies of all this material?
sure.
Because I really think we're going to need that.
Yeah.
And the report will be way more detailed than this. This is just summary.
Right. We'll provide the whole report on. We can give a link to a Dropbox site or something so you can get the whole report. Definitely. Security is a concern with the administration being right in the center of the building, not by the front door at all. And mechanical systems. This was manifested when Frank Locker was here. There was a radiator that was heating up outside, and we could barely hear each other, I think. So it's an inefficient steam system. The ventilation is really the biggest concern, and in terms of code is the most non-compliant. Acoustics, like I mentioned. Plumbing, they're all original fixtures, and again, most of them do not meet ADA clearances and all of that. Fire protection, code does require a fire suppression system for a building of this size and this building type, and there currently is none. And the electrical system is also obsolete. Going on to East Meadow, it's a very compact plan. This is to the same scale. Looking at the MSBA guidelines again in orange are kind of all of the classrooms on the outside, and the ones that are greater than 25% under the MSBA guidelines are the library, the gym, the music room, I think it is right there, and the administration. So very similar to West Street. A lot of the same facility conditions as at West Street. There has been some upgrades here. The roof is new. There have been 2 new ventilation systems that have been added, so the areas of the building that are serviced by those HVAC units are in pretty good shape, but in general the rest of the building is in a very similar condition as West Street. The building envelope certainly needs updating. There's a lot of accessibility issues. There's many 2-foot doors at East Meadow, which are bizarre to even walk by. It really kind of catches your eye. Security, same thing. The administration is right in the center of the building and not near the front door. So yeah, the library and administration both got new RTUs, but the rest of the system is old, and especially in terms of ventilation is very lacking. Fire protection, same issue, and electrical is very similar as well. Any questions on existing conditions? I don't want to gloss over it, but I also don't want to.
You mentioned fire suppression. You are saying this will have to be a sprinkled building.
Correct. Yep. Any other questions on existing conditions? All right, I'm going to plow right into proposed plans. So I think we met with the MSBA after our last school building committee meeting?
Yes.
Yeah. So we had 6 options previously. We met with our project manager from the MSBA. They came out here and visited with the design team and with Isabelina and some of her staff, and took a quick tour of the building. And the big upshot of that meeting, they were kind of going over, okay, this is the process, these are all the things that you have to turn in, these are all the submittals that are due. The big upshot was that there was another option that was added to the table. We were curious because the statement of interest is on West Street specifically, whether we should even be looking at East Meadow at all. We knew that we should be looking at that site because potentially a new building would be going on that site, but we didn't know if we should be looking at the existing East Meadow school. And the feedback that we got from the MSBA is that because a pre-K through 6 option is on the table, and if that pre-K through 6 option involves East Meadow, then we should be familiar with East Meadow as well. So that added on what's now become option number 5, which is an ad reno for a pre-K through 6 school at East Meadow. So we've divided it out by the 2 different sites. Option number 1 is fix West Street, and we'll talk about that when we talk about the finances and the numbers. I'm not going to show a plan for fixing West Street because it's just the existing plan addressing all of the accessibility and code compliant concerns. So we have 3 options for West Street and 3 options for East Meadow. An ad reno at both locations, but a different size, and then a new pre-K through 3 or a new pre-K through 6 at both of the different sites. So, as reluctant as we are to show you costs, we're also reluctant to show you floor plans because this is not what the building's going to look like, but this is a general approach to show you the layout, to show you how the building might fit on the site, to show you how classrooms and the public, gym and cafeteria might interact with one another. This is a new ad reno. I'm sorry, take new out of there. This is an addition renovation for a pre-K through 3 school at the existing site. And our basic idea here is that on this 1956 wing, there's a lot of really neat features in those classrooms, and that seems to be the part of the school that's in some of the best shape. And then the other part of the school that seems worth saving is this historic core. So basically saving those 2 wings and adding a new gym and administration off on the west side and new classrooms here off to the north side. In terms of the site plan, you can see here is our new well location with a protection zone and then a larger protection zone. This, you can't have any buildings or parking or anything in there. Here you can have some degree of leeway in terms of what goes on the site. Right now we're showing, for the site plan, we're pulling out parking and bus drop-off, trying to separate the cars from the buses as much as possible. That was a goal in all of these site plans. We're showing 8 buses queued up in all of these site plans on the site. Right now, as the buses queue up, they have to queue up on the street, which is not so safe. And so we have teacher parking and then parent parking and visitor parking. In general, on all these site plans, we're showing kind of as much parking as we feel will comfortably fit. Probably a little more than what we might end up with, especially for the pre-K through 6 option if we go that way, but just keep that in mind. We're just kind of exploring the extents of the site. So we have a new covered play area, new play areas out back, moving the well, and getting new septic fields off to the east side of the site. Any questions on the site plan? I'll zoom in to the.
It's very compact.
What's that?
This looks really compact. And maybe
Yeah, it's
just
definitely
visual.
taking up the whole lot on that south side. Again, the parking could probably shrink a little bit, but for now, that's what we can fit comfortably. Zooming in on the building itself, here in this dashed line, this is the existing outline of the school. This is that courtyard, and so we're basically opening that courtyard up so that it becomes kind of a little courtyard, and we have the library still here with some special education classrooms off to the side, art and music in purple, cafeteria and kitchen in that darker blue, gymnasium and administration. Administration's right in front. We're still keeping the main entry kind of where it is today, and potentially a community use entry on the other side of administration for gym use. Kind of important things to note, we're sprinkling special education throughout the school, some at a larger classroom, almost classroom size, and some at a smaller breakout size for smaller breakout groups. with both of these ad reno options, we're trying to accommodate what we have, as Margot presented in the space program, for a new pre-K through 3. So this is pretty close to what you get with a new pre-K through 3 school in terms of the sizes of the classrooms. Of course, we're constrained by what's there existing now, but they're pretty close, and so it's not much of a reach to have that look like the new pre-K through 3.
What's the silver next to the cafeteria and the dining room?
So yeah, silver is custodial, kind of toilet and boiler room and custodian's office and shipping, receiving, storage, things like that. Option 3 is a new pre-K through 3 at West Street. What we don't have on here is the existing building footprint. Sorry about that. But the existing building footprint basically comes up right to the west of the new school. So the big benefit of this is we have a very compact footprint. This is a 2-story pre-K through 3. And the reason why we did that and put it on such a compact footprint is that you would not have to move the students or pay for modular classrooms while this is being built. They would basically, the contractor would take control of that side of the site, build a building, move the kids in, demolish the existing school. So very similar to now, but bus drop off here, parking separated out, new septic fields again to the west, new well location just like last time, and play areas to the north. Please stop me at any time if you guys have questions. This is the 2-story.
I have a quick question.
Sure.
So, since we mentioned that these were location neutral and the size was going to, when we say new PK through 3, it would be 54,000 square feet or so. So, is this representing that roughly?
Correct.
Mhm.
Okay.
Correct. Yeah.
Can I ask on that option?
Yep.
Did you ever consider the building being completely inverted? Whereas where the well is, I mean, you're building new back there, so the existing building can stay while the building is, just an idea.
Well, the well right now is here, and so the only spot on the property where we could put the well where it's not going to be impacted by parking or the building is to stick it further north on the site. And so then with the new well back in this area and the existing school pretty close to the street here, we basically fit the new school in between those two constraints. Okay, so we're putting the new well back there. We want this building to stay,
Going in between, okay.
and so we put the new building kind of right in between those two.
How does this compare to 1-story structure as far as separation of some activities and the flow of things within the building?
Yeah, well, here's the floor plan on the 2-story, and I like it.
Well, you'll get to see a 1-story.
We do have a 1-story where it's flatter and longer. What's nice about this is that it does, going back to Frank Locker's presentation and that talk about kind of sub-communities within the larger school community. One way to do that is by grouping those classrooms around common spaces, and another way is to put them on 2 different floors. So right now, as we're showing here, we have 3 kindergarten classrooms, 2 pre-K classrooms, and 2 first-grade classrooms, all on the first floor. So it would be a very kind of small environment. It's not very many classrooms clustered around. And then up on the second floor, you would have your 2nd and 3rd grade. We have music down on the first floor near the stage, and art up above on the 2nd floor. Again, we have our special education resources kind of scattered throughout the building. A main entrance with the administration right on the front there, and then a community entrance between administration and the gymnasium. So it's possible that you could close the building off here at night and have this open for community use, including the library, the cafeteria, kitchen, that's the stage. That's shipping and receiving and custodian for now. And kind of keep the rest of the school somewhat private. So that's a 2-story pre-K through 3 on this site.
And 2 stories have a better energy profile. I mean, you have less exterior
This is a new pre-K through 6 at West Street. Here we tried to avoid the existing building, but with a school this size at pre-K through 6, we just couldn't do it. So this is still a 2-story. And basically our thought was here is that the existing building is down here, and the only part that sticks up into this footprint is that 1956 portion of classrooms that sticks off to the north. And so one option is that there's kind of 2 options in terms of phasing this in terms of construction. One is that those students could be put in modular classrooms while this is being constructed. You'd still have the core of the school here. This library could still be here. The administration would still be there. But the rest of the classrooms would be in modulars. Another option is to have the contractor just build this classroom wing first, while the rest of the school is still in session. Then move those kids from this northern wing into those classrooms, kind of seal that off, demolish that wing, and build the rest of the new school. Either way, we'll show you later on the cost. That's an additional cost, whether it's modular classrooms or it's having the contractor jump through all of these hoops to make it work. It would be an increased project cost. So, later on down the road, if this is the option we want to pursue, we could figure out how best to do that. But those are kind of 2 of the options on the table. Very similar to before, 2 wings with the pre-KK. I think we have 1st, 2nd, and 3rd all on the 1st floor, and then 4th, 5th, and 6th classrooms up above on the 2nd floor. So those were the 3 options for West Street. And then we have options at East Meadow. So this is a ad reno to East Meadow, and this is to make it a pre-K through 6 at East Meadow. This is all 1 story. This is largely keeping East Meadow intact with some modifications inside of that shell, and then a large addition to the south of East Meadow. I forgot my notes from. So there are 2 wells at the East Meadow and High School site. One of them is used as an emergency well, and that's to save the town money in terms of not having to test it. And so both schools rely on 1 well. I think it's the one to the west, the furthest west. So that well could continue to serve both schools in this scenario. Right now, there is some paving going over that buffer zone. And so basically, we can't modify any of that paving. So in all of these schemes, you'll see that we've adjusted kind of the site layout outside of that circle, but not inside of that circle. So the high school circulation stays largely the same. There is a parking lot back here now. We're making it much bigger, and then having the 8 buses drop off in front of the school.
Why don't you point out where East Meadow is?
Right, it's this rectangle right here. And the parking right now is basically taking the parking requirements of West Street and taking the parking requirements of East Meadow and adding them together. So there's no economy of scale there. So I think this is showing more parking than we would actually need. But it's being conservative, and it's better to be conservative now, and we can always have a much nicer looking landscape plan later on down the road. In general, we tried to put the parking off to the sides of the building so that you're not looking, across a big sea of pavement with the school behind it. So we tried to get the bus drop off in front and very convenient, and then to try to tuck most of the parking to the side of the school. Zooming into the plan, so this is the existing plan at East Meadow, small here and larger here. It's this rectangle here, where that line is the dividing line. That's the current south facade of East Meadow. And we're rearranging some of the classrooms to kind of break up that hallway space a little bit. Putting a courtyard in where the library is now and moving the library to where the gym is now. That brings some daylight into the school and some natural ventilation, which seems critical, and also takes advantage of that space that's perfectly sized for a library and not perfectly sized for a gym. We introduced another courtyard to the south of the existing school, and then new administration, new gym cafeteria wing, and some more classrooms along that south and eastern side. So that's a ad reno pre-K through 6 all on one floor for East Meadow. This is a new pre-K through 3 at East Meadow. Very similar site layout to what we had in the previous example. Again, bus drop off to the south, expanding that parking area to the west, but just keeping some separation between the new school and East Meadow. Here we're showing a one-story pre-K through 3. Certainly this option could be 2 stories, like the 2-story option that we showed in West Street, but we just kind of wanted to explore a 1-story option and see how that fit on the site and how it felt in terms of the layout of the classrooms. We also bounced between, wanting to have maybe a separate entrance for East Meadow and a separate entrance for this new building. But in the end, it made most sense, especially in terms of the site layout, to have one administration and one main door that could monitor that entrance securely. In this scenario, we're not touching the East Meadow School. So, the administration is still tucked into the middle of that school. So if we had that be the front door that was shared by both, you still kind of have an unsecure situation in East Meadow. So main entrance to the south of the new pre-K through 3, administration, library, your gym cafeteria block, art and music, and then kind of your classroom wing, which is classroom, special education, and in red you see some teacher planning also scattered throughout the school.
Christian,
Yes?
is that a enclosed connecting corridor between the 2 buildings?
That's what we envisioned. Yeah. That would probably have some, at least double doors here so that you could get some equipment through if you had, but you do have access all the way around both buildings, so not critical. But yeah, we did envision it as some enclosed corridor connecting the 2. Last option. A new pre-K through 6 at East Meadow. This is a new 2-story pre-K through 6 south of the existing East Meadow School that could be repurposed afterwards for some other use because those students would be in the new building. Again, the parking here, I think it's a little excessive. In this one, they, because of the new parking scheme, they did move the well to the north of the site, much like we would have to do at West Street. New septic system, which is larger for the pre-K through 6 than for the pre-K through 3, of course. A new play area between the 2 buildings, and then that 2-story pre-K through 6 to the south. This 2-story pre-K through 6, again, a main public entrance for the students to the south, a community entrance to the west, a gym cafeteria block, and kind of your classroom block with art on the 2nd floor, music on the 1st floor, trying to get some shared spaces between the classrooms. Those kind of details we can figure out later, but wanted to start exploring some of those ideas as we just look at some of these general broad concepts. So, that's a lot to look at, but those are the 7 options. We don't need to decide on a preferred approach tonight. We don't need to for a little while, but it's something to start thinking about, which option seems to make the most sense to you. In general, right now, we're looking at this report that's going to the MSBA, and hopefully the school building committee is saying that, yes, we're on the right path. These are the options we want to explore. Then hopefully the MSBA agrees with that and says, you're right, these are the options that make the most sense. And if the committee wants to give the MSBA some inkling of directions that they're leaning at this time, that's fine. That's something we can include in the report. It's always good to give them a heads up on which way we think we might be headed, but it's certainly not required. And I'm turning it back over to Margot for the
What you've been all waiting for all night. Give me the
yeah.
Okay. So, yeah, this is too small to see. Sorry about that. Next time we'll try to bring the presentation a little closer. So these are the 7 options. The basic repair option takes the square footage that you have here, multiplies by $200 per square foot, and you get this $8.8 million construction cost, which becomes, we want to say that there's a construction cost and then a project cost. And the cost to build it is also, the difference between construction cost and project cost are fees and soft costs and OPM and all kinds of, and furniture and equipment. So it's roughly a half again put into this project cost budget. In order to do the repair option, you have to put in a new well, new septic, and there are potentially other site costs that are non-reimbursable. So that's why that has to go into a separate column, because MSBA just doesn't pay for that. So the total would be 13 million. We don't know how much participation you would get from MSBA. They do have the green repair program and some other options, but generally it's not your typical reimbursed project. You might have to bear the entire cost. So we've transferred that over as a $13.4 million option. And this is certainly we're only doing this as a benchmark to compare what a new school would cost.
Can I just ask on that first option, if that's your base, when would we hear something from the MSBA that would say, yeah, we would support this, or no, we won't? When does that happen?
After they look at this report.
Okay.
Yeah.
So soon, pretty soon.
Why do you have extra copies of that?
There were a bunch. Okay, so
I'm sorry, are we saying that there will not be any reimbursement for that first option, or are we don't, okay.
Yes, there would be reimbursement. We just don't know how much reimbursement there would be, because you're basically just taking this existing building and doing repair work to it. They will reimburse you something, but it can't be quantified at this point in time. Right?
You'd still have undersized classrooms, you'd still have an undersized kitchen, you wouldn't have what they consider state-of-the-art facilities.
And as a result, they wouldn't consider reimbursing, is that it?
Right.
Well, you'd have to apply under a different program. You
Yeah,
have
it would
to
just be
apply under a
repairs.
repair program.
Oh, okay.
Because you're not satisfying the educational need
Okay.
of the school, so it's kind of a different animal altogether.
It was that other column, and previously when you were saying the recommended column, we're not meeting that minimum criteria.
Right.
Okay. Right. So the second one we looked at was the ad reno option, and so that for the renovation part, it's almost as expensive to renovate as it is to build new, and in fact sometimes it's even more. But so that one's approximately half renovation, half new, and then there's quite a bit of demolition involved. So that the construction cost is $17.5 million, which generates a project cost of $26 million. There again are 1.3 million site costs that are probably not reimbursable. And we said modulars there because you would have to move out of places and phase it a lot. So that one comes to a Granby share of 13.2. And I want to say that right now, MSBA reimburses communities at a price of $275 per square foot of new construction. They don't go higher. So even though your percentage, your reimbursement percentage, as far as we know, is higher than 55, it's 58, I believe,
About that.
you'll end up paying overage. So we're being very conservative with these numbers. We don't want to give you a low number and then find out it's more.
I just want to clarify. So are you saying that Granby would be responsible for the column that says approximate town cost plus the Granby share?
No. The green bar Granby share would include all costs that Granby would be responsible for that.
We added that together.
Okay.
Right, so the ad reno is 13.2 million. A new pre-K on West Street is the 53,700 square feet times $340 a square foot.
May I interrupt
Yeah,
for 1 second?
yeah.
Granby share for the ad reno option based on 27,705 at 45%, is it something like 12,467 as opposed to that? Because the following option actually is higher in total with the 45% Granby share. Actually, it shows less.
Right.
Because
So what we had to
what
do
you're
here-
doing, what you're doing, they're paying
It's
55% of the project cost, and then you add on this
The
other
town.
column. Okay, if you take 26,330 times 55%
Right.
Yep.
equals what the MSBA share is.
Okay.
But then you have to take project cost minus MSBA plus the town cost to give Granby share.
So that's what I think.
That's what I
everyone
was
knows
trying to.
Right, and that's exactly how you're doing it.
Okay. All right. Thank you. Yeah,
Thank you, Emma.
thanks.
Glad you got it down. Usually
good.
takes a lot of explanation.
The new PK to 3 at West Street, you're putting 53,700 square feet. With the new PK 3 at East Meadow, it's only 41,500 square feet. Leads me to a second question to ask later. But what is it that is not being built, presumably coming out of what's in East Meadow, to be able to do the PK 3 at East Meadow 45,000 square feet?
I mean, the 51,570 versus the 53,700, is that the question you have? Or
No,
not?
what's happening, Joe?
6. Oh, let me get down there, okay? And it's very possible that we have a wrong number. Shucks. Darn. And that's the low ball one. Okay, that is a mistake. We can fix that and we can tell you what it should be. But,
Well, then I have another question which relates to that, but I'll wait to go through.
okay. This is why we like to present these things and go through them carefully. So where was I? So new pre-K through 6 on West Street is 77,600 gross square feet. That's multiplied by 330, not 340, because there's a little more economy of scale. And then again, you have to demolish the existing building. So that becomes a $28 million project, 28.7, with fewer, you don't have to put modular classrooms there, so there's less direct costs, and it ends up in the 13 million range anyway. New pre-K, well, I already went through that. Okay, I'm sorry. So the new pre-K through 6 is 19.2 million. It's bigger, and it's about 6 million more than a pre-K through 3 at West Street. The ad reno at East Meadow is 37.6 at 325 and 34. This is for a pre-K through 6. 34,870 at 350. That becomes 24 million with a project cost of 36.6. There are some site costs, but a lot fewer at Meadow Street. There may be some oil tanks, there may be I forget what else, but there will be, no doubt, unreimbursable site costs. There always are on these projects, but much lower order of magnitude here. So that one, the total is 36.6. MSBA pays 20 million, and the cost of the town is 16.6.
Margot, just a real quick question.
Yeah.
If we do a pre-K through 6, or even the pre-K through 3 up at East Meadow, and that 200,000, is that basically for possible septic system upgrade or replacement?
Well, actually, no. Do you remember what I said about something?
Yes, some of that is septic, and some of that is a new fire suppression system as well.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Yeah.
The only reason I'm asking is because on the last project, when we're looking at the high school and creating the campus, he was giving us issues, over Title V issues, with the current septic and adding in the
Septic in the
additional
well
bodies
have to be looked
putting in there, so.
I think the well was okay unless we got too close with the paving,
Okay.
but the septic was definitely.
Because I know under the old project, we had talked about putting the well at the north side of the project.
Right.
And we had already done
That might have been because of the size.
Yeah.
I'll have to check with the design.
Okay, cool. I'm just
Yeah.
asking the question, so
Yeah.
Good.
that's all.
Yeah, that may not be quite strong enough. We might have to add a little more. Yeah. Okay, then pre-K, a new pre-K through 3 where we don't demolish East Meadow, we just build a new school there on the campus.
That's wrong.
That was the wrong one?
Yeah.
Right, okay. What should it be?
Should be.
You can all write this down.
Does everyone want to write this down? So it's, well, all round. So 18.3 million is the construction cost. 27.4 million is the project cost. MSBA share is basically 15 million. And Granby share is 12.5. Apologize for that.
Yeah, I'm very sorry. We should have known this.
So what is the square footage?
The square
Should be
footage
same as
should be
new pre-K through 3
the
at West
53.
Street.
West Street.
The 53,700.
It's the same.
The savings that you get from the new pre-K through 3 at West Street is there's no demo. So
At Meadow.
at East Meadow, right, versus the new pre-K through 3 at West Street. There's no demo, so that saves $800,000 or $900,000, and then there's less town costs, less site costs.
And then new pre-K through 6, I think we got that one right. It's 77,600 times 330, 25 million, plus soft cost is 38 million. There, we would need a new well for sure, because there's not enough capacity for that big an enrollment. And again, septic and other site options, but still less than you have on West Street. And that figures out to $17.5 million project there. So again, we're hoping you'll approve this in sort of a schematic way, and we'll double check and fix these figures and make sure their site costs are right, and then submit it.
We're going to the meeting on the 16th, is that right?
We're submitting the information, there's no
Submitting the
meeting,
information on the 16th.
yeah.
Whenever that submission takes place, or after the submission takes place and the meeting takes place, then are the assumptions pretty much set in stone?
Thank you. Don't play on there. That's not good.
Not yet. The options are set in stone. The choice of which one you want to go with is yet to be
No,
done.
that's not, but let me be more specific. Back up to, on the sheet that looks like this. Talk about a section that's under number 4, the preliminary design program initiative. We talked about educational program and initial space center. I'm in agreement in theory with the idea that the educational program should move out of the schools. What I'm not in agreement with is that there is one only way to arrive at the education program. And what I mean as an example of the cost of this is as follows. If you look at the difference between what the MSBA says is the space that they recommend for us for the size of what we have here, there's 15,000 square feet difference than what we have included here. 15,000 square feet on the basic piece, and then that means that there's another 7,500 square feet for the miscellaneous at 50%. Well, if you put those together for the construction costs, that comes out to be an additional $7 million in construction costs by going with this bigger size. And if you all remember last time that we went through a building project, there were lots of fights about what should be done here and what should be done there, but I submit to you that there's nothing that we're going to be able to do around the construction of the building if we're stuck with 51,000 plus 50% square feet as opposed to 38,000 plus square feet. That $7 million is more than you can wring out of anything in what else is happening. So my question is that how certain are we that there's no adjustment that can be done in this initial space requirement?
Well, DESE approves the special ed spaces compared to the program that's offered. And I think if you show that you have, so many programs going on, they would want you to have the proper spaces for those.
So I haven't had a chance to review
Right.
individually. You just sent it to us.
Yeah.
But the additional, because I'm looking at what John is looking at, the additional spaces is primarily special education. Is that what you're suggesting? So we're predominantly within reason with what MSBA is recommending for regular education spaces.
Yeah, well, we do want you to think with us through the classroom question. I mean, right now, for pre-K through 6, you have
John, are you
you
thinking
have more
mostly for the
classrooms
pre-K
than
through
what
3
they...
or the pre-K
Right,
through
but
6?
what you did is you made smaller classrooms to stay within the square footage spaces, I thought you said.
No, you
Oh.
have smaller classrooms. They won't approve smaller classrooms.
John, are you trying to ask that if DESE approves the number of classrooms here, will the MSBA increase their guidelines to cover additional construction costs?
No, I'm assuming that they are going to increase their
Yeah.
guidelines to construct.
If they-
But what I'm saying is that it doesn't make any difference because the cost of the thing is $7 million more at 51,000 square feet plus the additions plus the 50% overage, as opposed to 38,000 square feet plus the 50% additions for you.
Well, you should look at the 41,000 because you do have this column has the pre-K program in it, so that's why it's 41,600. It's not quite fair to compare the 44 to 38. Yeah. And that's what
Doesn't
it's...
have to,
So we're saying there's only 12,000 additional square feet.
There's,
All right, so.
Right. But you still multiply that.
Yeah.
Yep.
That's 12 plus 6, 18,000 square feet.
Right.
That's over 300 square feet.
Right.
right. I think there's two issues here, and part of it is I don't know. Part of it is the problem with the sheet itself. Okay, so if you look at the net floor area, we're over from the MSBA guidelines by 4,000 square feet. So certainly we could talk to Isabelina and see if we could chip down at that 4,000 square feet. But we're again, like Margot said, we're taking what the district has now. We're taking what the MSBA guidelines are, and we're trying to find a middle ground. So we're already cutting a classroom.
Can you give what MSBA sees as a teacher-student ratio? Because
It's unworkable.
Well, that's-
What you say
We
though?
have 50, you have 215 kids divided by, well, each grade has 51 to 54 kids in it. And the problem is, they give you 2 kindergarten classes, which means you'd have over 25 kids in kindergarten, which isn't even allowed by the state.
But that is their expectation.
So the
Right.
problem is that, like Margot said, the MSBA equation kind of breaks down at a school this small. So we're 4,000 square feet over on net. The other area where this really breaks down is they give you a grossing factor of 1.22, which is physically impossible.
Yeah.
So if you go to a pre-K through 6, all of a sudden they give you a grossing factor of 1.54, which is a huge difference. So on our
And it
pre-K
doesn't
through
make
6,
sense because they're more, you've got more classrooms to work with.
Right.
So-
so you could have a smaller gross area. So on
Yeah.
the pre-K through 6, we felt pretty confident that we could do it at 1.5. That we didn't need 1.54. That with 1.5 grossing factor, we could do a school that works. With this one, we felt that maybe we could do it with a 1.4 grossing factor, which is already pretty lean. But there's no way we could do it at 1.22. So I think that's accentuating the difference between the MSBA guidelines and what we're proposing, which I see where you're coming from, certainly. But I think that adds to that sense that, it could be cheaper if we just followed the MSBA guidelines. Well, if we just followed the MSBA guidelines, we wouldn't have bathrooms, or your hallways would be 3 feet wide.
It's illegal.
So
And we'll have kindergarten classrooms of 25 and our regular first grade classrooms of 24 and 25, which has not been the commitment of the district. And that would be, as soon as we heard that, we said that really hasn't been the essence of the district.
So if we go to a 2-story structure, that factor doesn't change?
No. I mean, because you have to have more stairwells, and you have to have an elevator. So,
John, in plain English, are you just trying to get the building smaller so we can make
Yeah.
it cheaper? Because looking at these individual things, at least on the new pre-K to 3, I mean, some of the requirements that the MSBA requires for administration and guidance, we don't have in a pre-K to 3, like guidance counselors.
We have counselors. We have social workers.
Or an assistant principal.
Well, at this point, the only thing I'm saying is that, again, this is going back to what we know happened the last go-around. If this figure of square footage is set in the very beginning, then we almost don't need to worry about anything else. We start working right now to how to explain this cost to the people who are going to have to vote to increase their taxes. There's nothing you're going to be able to do with tinkering here and there to knock $5.5 million off the price. Now, I understand that you're saying that for a very small school, the guidelines probably don't work. Every individual piece looks fine. When you add them all up, and you get the sum total that the taxpayers are going to have to spend, you can need a very, very good explanation of why the MSBA's guidelines are no good, and that we know better, and yet they won't pay for it.
well, I think, there are probably places to cut. And Isabelina hasn't had a chance to do it. And we're sorry that the timing has been so crunched and holidays and everything, that we didn't give her time to do the job. And we're happy to do smaller schools. We know you want it to be MSBA approved to get the reimbursement. But we have done smaller schools, so we'll see.
I don't think the space summary is cast in stone at the PDP line at this next submission that we're doing on the 16th. Certainly this will get refined. This will get refined through construction documents, right? Because we say we're going to have a classroom right now that's 950 square feet. And down the road, maybe our classroom will be 930 square feet. Where it really, I think, starts getting dialed in is at the preferred schematic report level, and we really need to go through it in more detail. I mean, right now, they have all of these individual spaces for administration and guidance, for example. In general, for most of our school designs, we don't do all of those little rooms. We do a much bigger room that everyone can kind of share. And then sometimes that becomes smaller than what the MSBA guidelines call for. So, you know, there's definitely movement as we keep going down the path.
Well, Superintendent Rodriguez has said that they haven't had a chance to look at this yet, so I think it's very important that she and staff get a chance to do that. I just want us to be very careful that we don't make any submission that's going to be cast in stone. Because if we do, then that will be the key thing that people will look back upon and say that it was lost in the very beginning.
I agree.
So if you can submit it and you can be certain that these numbers can be changed, that's one thing. If the submission is going to fix that in stone, I think we have to think very careful about it.
Well, I agree with what you're saying, John, and these numbers are going to change. We have to recognize that. And we're talking about corridors which are going to be 4 feet wide or 5 feet wide in some cases. These are what the people are going to shake out. I don't think we're going to reduce these numbers by a significant amount of square footages because we need to make the building function. I mean, that's a given. You're correct, the numbers are going to be fluid, they're going to be movable. And I think these people have done an outstanding job in their presentation here tonight. And I think that numbers that jump off this chart to me is if we can reno this building out in East Meadow, rent it for pre-K for $16 million, and that means that we don't have to go back into that existing building for many years for $8 million. I think we need to think about it when the state is paying us a good portion of the money. And I think
Well,
that
again, I agree, the
flexibility.
presentation is very, very good, and all the individual pieces as individual pieces look fine. It's adding up the total. That,
Yeah, well, you're absolutely right.
Yeah.
If you want the final number to be lower, the only place to change is really how much square footage you have.
Our school is on the very small side of what the MSB considers as good.
That's correct.
The 215 is very small.
Yeah, very small. So is there any chance at all that they'd be open to any sort of discussions on things like the classroom side? The room side of it, things like that?
In terms of
I mean, we know we have some things now.
In terms of smaller classrooms,
Yeah.
and well, they have a range, so you can see over there, you know, that their classrooms are between 900 square feet and 1,000 square feet for any classroom between grades 1 through 6. You know, right now we're saying 950 right down the middle. We could go to 900, certainly. I think MSBA wants to see justification if you're going beyond their recommendations, and they want to see justification if you're going under their recommendations. Because, you know, it's a state program, and they want to make sure that they're not investing in a school that in 5 years people are going to say, these classrooms are unusable. Why did you build a new school with 800 square foot classrooms? You know, I can't break my kids out into 3 different groups in here. And so then that looks bad for the state and looks bad for the community.
But Christian, one of the, correct me if I'm wrong, but one of the models that we were looking at, and I think that we suggested was one of our preferences, was the one that had a way to open, so the classrooms would be 2 classrooms together.
Certainly.
So if we went with the 900, for example, because the teachers like the idea of sharing space,
Right.
then you literally are then talking about a larger space.
Right.
And then instead of 900, so that if for some reason the school needed a larger space, and we are talking about whether it's that barn door, the movable door, we could make a larger space in that learning area.
Right. And striving for that flexibility will be
And which is
critical
what we
going
talk
forward.
about a lot. The teachers kept talking about the flexibility of changing and moving the learning spaces, knowing that learning is going to change as we move forward. So,
you know, I think that when I look at this and when Deb and I and Dr. Jefferson sit down with you folks to look at these space needs, I think we need to think about that and not just limit ourselves just to what's on the paper for numbers.
That's next. I mean, in large corporations, they build buildings. Buildings are constructed so there are quite a few spaces,
Yeah.
which are divisible into 2, 4, 8 different rooms. Depending on
And
these are they're
multi-purpose.
basically soundproof and multi-purpose and everything else. Does the MSBA allow that kind of thinking?
I think so, yes, to a certain extent, right? Again, it's all about justifying.
And some of the models that we identified were those kind of forward-thinking models.
Yeah.
So again, as far as your timing, before you go to the MSBA, when is that meeting? Will that give you some opportunity to go over these numbers?
It's next week. It's
So-
when we're supposed to.
So that binder, we submit this binder next week. And in this binder, actually, we need, correct me if I'm wrong, but we need a vote from a formal vote that's recorded on the minutes that the committee approves the bulk of what's in this binder. So that goes in next week. And then our preferred schematic report isn't due until April, right? And that's when we really start narrowing down on, we would like a 1-story or a 2-story building. We would like a pre-K or through 3 or a pre-K through 6. And we would like West Street or we would like East Meadow. We really, we still broad brush strokes. We're not saying what it looks like. We're not saying what it's going to be clad in. We're not saying what kind of roof it's going to have. But broad idea, is it a 1-story building? Is it 2-story? Is it an ad reno? Is it a new? What site is it at? What's the general site layout going to be? So that's due in April. And then we have so the PDP report that they're reviewing now, this used to be they didn't used to have a PDP report, right? We didn't submit anything until we submitted the preferred schematic report. But then sometimes the MSBA said, well, why didn't you think of this option? Or, why was this option ignored? And so that's why they asked for this preliminary design program now, is so that they can kind of check in on our thinking of all of these options.
Is the programmatic justification for the space part of what the submission is?
Yes.
Yes.
And have we seen any of that? Going to be asked to vote on something we haven't seen?
It's built largely around that report that Frank Locker presented, and then the rest of it does come from the district, which we have not pulled together yet.
It's written.
I missed the question, try it again.
They're going to submit something we haven't seen, the programmatic justification for some of the space requirements that are...
The educational requirements. Are we qualified to make that decision as to what are the educational requirements for this school?
Are we qualified to vote on it? Is that what you're asking?
If we're qualified to vote on it, we're qualified to comment on it. I'm not qualified to say they need 3 classrooms, they need a special ed. I have to rely on the school department to say that.
So does that mean you're going to abstain from the vote?
No, I'm ready to vote right now.
Even though you don't understand what's being submitted?
I understand what's being said right here.
I don't feel comfortable in voting on the submission of something I haven't seen.
So are you going to abstain?
I would abstain rather than vote yes. I just want the rest of you to think about your comfort level in voting to submit for approval something which you have not seen.
Christian, what happens if we don't submit by the 16th?
Well, we could still
More of an
submit
Allen question.
and have the vote come later.
I'm just asking the question, just trying to figure out what would end up happening to us.
We'd probably lose out on the MSBA board approval date of June 3rd, if that was slipped to their July meeting. Anything could happen.
Can tonight's meeting be moved into recession and reconstituted next Monday? and us be given all the materials before then, to at least take a look at it?
We have a school
We have a
committee
school
meeting Monday.
So, just to clarify, the numbers that you will go to the MSBA with, will they be the final numbers, or given that their guidelines seem to indicate some other figures as well, is that the beginning of some conversation,
That's the
negotiation?
beginning of the conversation. But this is a submission that says, okay, here we have framed this now for the 7 scenarios that we're talking about, and we're sending it into them so they can see that framework. They're going to push back and say, we think you're a little high here, you're a little low there. There's that kind of push and pull that's going to happen here.
So our vote here is basically to authorize you to enter into the conversation so we can get to figures that will be the final figures.
That
These are
allows
not
us
the
to say
final
that
figures.
here are the 7 solutions that we as a committee have looked at. We think they're a good viable start to things we want to explore, and that we put a programmatic square footage number to each one of the solutions. We put a budgetary guesstimate, if you will, to each one of those solutions, and we're submitting it to the MSBA for your feedback on what our thoughts are. We're not locking ourselves into anything at this point in time. We're just saying, here's what we've developed to this point in time since we've hired the design team. And there's a whole lot of talk that goes on between now and when you go into the schematic design.
I mean, the broadest brush is, have we looked at every option you want to consider? Are we missing anything?
Well, you've got a number of things here. The options are all fine.
Yeah, I mean, is there a
options look-
3-story option?
Yeah, right. No, the options are fine. That's not the point. The point is that I always think of government at its worst is when legislators are voting on things that they have no idea what they're voting on. Leadership of the legislature says, vote this way. By God, they say, aye, vote this way. I don't like to do business that way. I don't like to act that way. I don't like to operate that way. So I think that it's incumbent upon this committee to find a way to have another meeting before this is submitted, where we've had a chance to look at the materials that are going to be submitted. Otherwise, I don't know how we can approve the submission of them.
But isn't this material
He
being
said-
submitted?
No,
right
there's
now?
more,
I just
there's
asked.
more.
What-
There's a lot more detail, but,
And there's this whole
and the
program
review.
of justification.
Yeah, educational.
What we just got from Frank.
No, it's the district's plan, what your long-range goals are, and about the details that you provided. That you have to, anyway, it's in process, just isn't finalized.
Well, John, if those are summarized, would that satisfy what you're looking for? Instead of seeing all the documents? If somebody can summarize the district plan and whatever Isabelina's taking a look at that she just got today or yesterday. Today. If those are summarized, would that,
What's the summary contain?
Executive summary, would be, but your education program, you can send, we can make a PDF of the whole report. And we can come back.
Well, give us a few examples of what would be contained in this program. It's the long-term vision for the school system. It's the fact that
It's the fact that you do pre-K, and you have all-day kindergarten, and you teach it with, your basic enrollment and what you're
Predominantly, it's been already summarized in the MSBA proposal.
enrollment projections and
Yeah,
things, right?
most
So-
of the
statement of interest.
In the state, it's predominantly all the information that went in the statement of interest, John. The West Street School, the population, the
Special needs programs.
the number of classes, the
Projections for-
history.
yeah.
You have,
I don't have it.
do you want to get it? It's predominantly,
And in there, that builds up to these, whatever it is, 41 or 55,000
and an explanation,
square feet.
It builds up to the school population that's been, you've agreed to with the MSBA that you're designing your program to.
yeah, it's a summary, it summarizes where the feasibility process, it's a series of questions
Right,
that,
right.
How how do you build up to, which figure are we using? We're using,
And then I guess then Frank Blocker is then summarize his stuff
Yeah,
that you guys are putting together.
right.
What you're doing then, you're saying,
somehow or another, we got up to justification of one page, which is just PK through 3.
so right here is the number that you're using, is it gross?
53,000
Right.
square feet. And then gross-
53.7.
Right.
And then grossed up, and then grossed up by 40%. And then on the PK through 6, there's a figure of 77,500 grossed up by 50%.
There's 77.6 here.
Yeah, the 53.7 is the gross total.
How is that figure?
We used a 1.4 net gross. I mean, you add up all the different rooms.
I'd like to see, but
Yeah.
you said that the programmatic justification for that is going to be submitted.
The
Was
growth
that
figure,
Frank's
John,
report then?
No, I mean, I think the only thing that that says is, okay, there's 2 pre-K classrooms, but there's 3 kindergarten classrooms instead of 2. So we'll talk about the enrollment, we'll talk about how there's a historic precedent of having 3 kindergartens, we'll talk about how we wouldn't be able to fit the student population into 2 kindergartens. So that's a justification for the additional kindergarten that's required.
okay. Christian, I
Yeah.
think what John's trying to find is, how did you get to the 77,600 figure when you have educational space or programmatic space of only 51,000? What does the other,
Oh,
No,
well.
that's the
gross.
thickness of walls, the corridors, anything that's not in this, the numbers here, these are program
for
items.
bathrooms and?
Yeah.
Toilets,
Mechanical rooms.
wall thicknesses, corridors, stairwells,
Ductwork,
but
mechanical chasing.
And
Yeah.
please refresh my memory, the square footage of this building, that's a great place to start, is about 44,000.
139 square feet.
And the
With
square,
many undersized.
right, and the square footage of East Meadow is what, roughly?
It's 41.
Probably must be the 41.5 figure you had.
Yeah.
So we
The wrong
have,
number.
so we have a physical example of square footage that we're in this building today, right?
Right.
And we know that the new projections are in some cases a little less, in some cases a little more, but generally speaking, you know, maybe about the same, maybe a little heavier than what we have today, is that correct?
Well, a new pre-K through 3 would be larger. It's the 53.7. So it's larger than 44,000.
Right.
But if you add the 44 here and the 41.6 or whatever it is at Meadow,
Yep.
that's 87, and a new pre-K through 6 would be less.
Right.
Right. And that's, I think, like we said, with the space diagrams that showed what was grossly undersized, that's where most of your new square footage is coming.
Understood.
So administration,
Yep.
gym is
Yep.
another 3,000 square feet. Kitchen is much bigger than you have now, etc. Music room.
Okay.
On the page it says Granby new PK through 3.
Yes.
The proposed amount is 38,348. square
That's
feet.
with no pre-K. Sorry. There's 2 columns there.
Here's
It's
all
confusing.
This is MSBA guidelines.
Yep.
adjusted for pre-K.
MSBA, but this is what's been
Without
proposed.
pre-K.
Yes. So you got a 4,000 square foot additional.
Yeah, and I can see on here that this space has 1,000 more square feet. So- But what I haven't seen is what the justification is. What's the justification?
For the 10,000 square foot difference in size between MSBA stamp, the guidelines, and what we're proposing?
Well, on this page,
It's not 38 to
Well,
53,
it's
it's
38.
41.6 to 53.7.
right. And the space requirements, this total building net floor area is the difference between the 38,348 and 34,133.
Correct. Yep.
What's the justification for that?
Justification of that is 1 additional kindergarten classroom, 1
No,
additional,
No, that's the mechanics of it.
right,
What's the justification of it?
your school population and your historic use,
And the size of the school,
Class
and the
size.
size of the
That's
gym.
class size.
class size.
And class size and
So
gym is
the MSBA says that we have, what,
They
Too
take,
few kids in the class, too many kids in the class?
what they do, John, is they take the total number of kids and they take an average number, 24.
Yeah.
And they take they take 24, they divide that into the number, the total number. And they say you should have that many teachers. So they take 24 and divide it into 250 and say that, whatever that number is, that's how many teachers you should have. They don't care that of that 215, a percentage of that, a larger percentage is in kindergarten, and it's unequally divided amongst grades, and so that it's not equally divided per grade. So it would work is if we could evenly divide that number out per grade. But in kindergarten, for example, it just doesn't work. We can't put 24 kindergartners in 2 grades. We don't go that high. But as far as MSBA works, they're deciding 24 per classroom. Because with MSBA, that's how they average it out. Am I correct?
Correct.
Historically, Granby and most districts work within 18 to 20 per kindergarten. So what Christian is saying is what they will write in, and what they'll write in their justification is historically, Granby has had kindergarten classrooms, and I can tell you since I've been here for 4 years, it's been somewhere between 17 to 18, 19 kids in our kindergarten classroom. And so, and I'm sure they have our enrollments, they'll go historically within whatever number of years. Granby has averaged somewhere between 16, 17 to 20, and that in order to keep within that range, we need 3 kindergarten classrooms. And that will add whatever square footage. Additionally, we have 2 preschool classrooms. That's the additional integrated preschool. That's the additional 4,000. Additionally, we have 2 ABA special ed, substantially separate special ed classrooms. That adds to the square footage. Am I missing anything else for square footage?
No, I think that's a lot of it.
Well, let me give, all I understand so far is this, is that if you had a school with 4 grades, first, second, third, and fourth grade, and you have 36 kids in each grade, then the MSBA says you take the total number of students divided by 24, you come up with a total of 6 classrooms. And you say, but no, we need 8 classrooms because we've got 36 kids in each grade, so we need 8 classrooms, not 4 classrooms. All right, so I understand that's one possibility. But another possibility is this, is that if you've got 48 kids in your kindergarten class, the MSBA says you need 2 classrooms. We say, well, historically, we've only had 16 kids in a class, so we want 2 classrooms. I'd like to know which of those things is happening in this submission.
Well, I think they budgeted for, I think
3.
they budgeted, they created a plan based on 3, right?
Right.
But I know, but what's the number of kids?
Based on,
If we have 48 kids in the grade, and we're building 3 classrooms instead of 2 classrooms, because we want 16 in a class instead of 24 in a class,
Which is our culture here in town.
well, I want to know that.
For
Yes.
kindergarten, kindergarten statewide, 20 is considered maximum,
Right.
20 to 22.
Well, whatever it is.
And you
it's
get a
class.
bigger classroom in kindergarten because they move around.
So, and I'd like to clarify, we have, of that number, it's Granby. Then we accept, since I came on here, we came here to Granby, we opened up full-day kindergarten. As a result of full-day kindergarten, we've accepted school choice, and we've been able to increase the number of students in our kindergarten classrooms as a result of full-day and school choice. MSBA does not allow us to count those numbers in our student enrollment. So we can only say 16 or 17, but I can tell you as your superintendent that we push our numbers up to 18 and 19 by accepting school choice, historically and regularly. And that brings in a revenue of $5,000 per student. So what we can say to our community is by doing the 3 classrooms, which is what I've been saying as superintendent, by doing the 3 classrooms,
We are not only keeping our kindergarten quality grant, which pays for a portion of our kindergarten staff and materials and professional development, but we're also bringing in, this year, 12 school choice students, last year, 12 school choice students, and the year before 7. Every year we're growing. And we're keeping our numbers in a reasonable instructional group, anywhere between 17 to 20 students. And instead of going to 24, which we would then, or 20 or 22, if we have 48 known census kindergartners, we'd go to 24. I can tell you, just like the year I came here when we had a half-day kindergarten, we were losing our children immediately in kindergarten to the neighboring charter schools and our neighboring public schools, because our parents do not want to put children in kindergarten. And once we get them, we keep them. They love this school.
Yeah, so that's a longer term financial strategy that it's the short term versus the long term. So the question is, do you accept your plan, which envisions an additional classroom, and we pay for it over the course of 20 years at whatever your bonding rate is now, less than 3%, in order to secure an annual dividend of school choice? Well, you know, in my mind, I would make that trade every day and I appreciate the questions you're asking, because I think it's good. It's a good, healthy dialogue.
Well, I would suggest that before you just jump to the conclusion that you would accept that we actually sit down and figure that out. Maybe true or not be true. I understand what you're saying in theory. I would like to see the numbers.
See, I wouldn't say I'm jumping to. I mean, this is a conversation that we had we talked about this at least 6 months ago at prior meetings about this
Yes, we
idea
did.
of having a third classroom.
Yeah, we did.
So it's not new. It's not a brand new thing that we're hearing for the first
No,
time.
we had this conversation.
And part of the programmatic requirements that we are talking about right now, they actually are the result of conversations that are happening with the school committee and elsewhere. So it's not that we are at least hearing these numbers for the first time. In fact, as we are budgeting in the last 2-3 years, one of the considerations is class size. Whether or not class size should be within this range or that range.
Right.
And we hear the administration give us examples from across the state, and that's why we are around the numbers that we are right now, from 16 to 18, whenever we receive some students. So there is some thought behind that. When we go to 24, the danger is that we're making the space so tight that there is really no wiggle room for us to do anything, including school choice, let alone providing our own students with the space to function according to the program that we came up with.
And MSBA is not necessarily saying 24 in a kindergarten classroom. They're actually suggesting the upper grades are going to be 26 or 27, and that would never apply.
No, and generally the rule is 24. So you're like right over the cusp. You have 51 to 54 students per grade,
Mhm.
and that puts you over
Absolutely.
the limit. So then you either have to do looping and do a
Which
2-3 classroom, or to average the numbers out to get to the classrooms that they recommend requires some gymnastics, and it doesn't allow for future growth.
And I have to say that is one of the conversations that we had in this visioning, John, which is why the team suggested flexible spacing. Because to get to a place what Mark was talking about, the looping, professionally, I don't think staffing is there. That takes training, that takes a lot of professional development. But we would want our space to be set up in such a way that once we get that professional development in place, the training, that we could then enable that to happen, and slowly. And we don't want to go to a school that would prohibit that such instructional practice to occur.
I'd like to make the motion that we approve the submission of this report.
I have another question first.
No, I just got a motion on the
First,
floor.
motion on the floor.
I second it.
All right.
Not for discussion. Discussion.
Now, the guidelines, on the thing we're talking about, said that they would approve 34,000 square feet of space. Educational space. Educational space. And then the extra 20%.
Net square feet.
And we're asking for 38,000. In past meetings, past years, heard from time to time that you go beyond what their guidelines are. They'll let you do what they're
It could be five.
They'll put a limit size on the pool. Don't you pay for it. How certain is anybody that this extra 4,000 square feet is going to come with MSBA cost participation?
That's why we submit this. We find out. They're either going to bless the space summary or they're going to say, oh, no, you can't have that many. You know, they'll tweak it. And whatever they agree upon, that's reimbursable.
Yeah, that was my question earlier, it was the same thing.
Yeah.
If they're saying these are the guidelines and we're submitting something that's bigger, are they going to cover that expense, or does that become borne on us and then that
If
requires
you
us to do
justify
something
it.
else?
If we can
If
convince
they
them.
agree with the space summary,
Right.
then it's reimbursable.
Yeah.
But so they're going to push back
With the
after we do the
negotiation,
submission,
yeah.
and then we'll come to the committee and we'll discuss, and we'll all come up with what we're going to present at the preferred schematic report. Then the MSBA comments back on that. We'll bring it back to the committee. We'll push back and forth on that. Then we submit it for schematic design, and then schematic design, you've got your gross square footage number. Reimbursement comes from that. That's your budget going forward.
So if,
So
for
it's a
instance,
multi-step process.
the 4,000 square feet difference that we are seeing right now, they
Mhm.
say we're good with the 2,000 of it, you guys justified it, the other 2,000, we're not good with it. It comes back to this committee for further discussion and approval.
Sure.
Again, going back to, I guess, John, again, the dialogue is good, but I don't think we are making a final decision right now as far as these figures. And the difference is 4,000 square feet. Even now, there's no guarantee that the 4,000 square feet extra will be approved. We're just starting that communication with the MSBA so they can give us a reaction for us to go.
So the idea is that we're going to submit something that says, here's our random justification for 38,000 square feet. And they come back and say, well, we'll approve 34,000. And then we have an option of saying, well, we'll either pay for the additional 4,000 plus 50% extra ourselves, or else, we have a new programmatic justification. We have a new programmatic justification, and we're going to be able to reduce the size to 34,000 after that.
Is that the way-
Those
that
will
how
those
it
be our
works?
options? Will they let us reduce the size?
Sure, you could reduce,
Yeah.
or we could argue, push back and say, we think you're wrong because of this, this, and this. And we really do think it should be, it's a back and forth discussion.
I mean, what they won't approve of is if you shave the gym down to 3,000 square feet and you do a kitchen that's 1,000 square. I mean, if you shrink what they consider the minimum size for a public school in Massachusetts, then you might trigger them throwing the whole baby out and say, you're not complying with our space guidelines. So I'm just, we're happy to trim, you just can't, there are some thresholds that you have to meet.
But it's an iterative process.
Yes,
So there's
definitely.
an opportunity to
Yep,
continue
mean-
to make decisions.
yeah.
Ready for a vote?
Yep.
All right, all those in favor of approving, now we're gonna get this word right.
Preliminary design program
Preliminary design program,
submission
submission, thank you,
to the MSBA
to the MSBA.
on January 16th.
Right?
All those in favor?
Aye.
All right, all those opposed? Those abstain?
Aye.
Okay, thank you. And we didn't miss any options, did we?
Yes.
Bring them up now.
Good.
Covered more.
Okay, seeing as I didn't bring a minute,
Keep saying number 5.
next time we're gonna talk to Alan about that. And, motion to adjourn?
Next meeting? Next meeting
Already
date?
scheduled, unless we have a change,
Um,
unless I send out another email.
Can you
That
speak
says
a little
the
bit to
5th,
go through
is it
this?
the 5th?
Yeah, we do, our next was scheduled for February 19th.
Yeah. So it's not the 5th then?
Oh, that's why the question mark was there.
But that may be school vacation week too.
The 19th is? Yeah, it is President's Week, isn't it?
Yeah.
Sorry?
The 19th? Is that vacation week?
Yes, yes.
So we may
So
want to
let's
bump it
change
up.
it.
You may want to bump it up 1 week.
The week before? The week prior?
12th and 17th.
Yes.
Which is Thursday?
Yeah.
12?
What date are you looking at?
I think we were at the 12th.
February 12th?
I won't be here.
Good luck.
Lincoln's Day.
Yeah. But it's
Southeast Asia.
before the
The third Monday in February is President's Day, and that's usually school vacation week.
Well, I'll bring pennies. Recite the Gettysburg Address.
And hopefully,
6:30. All right. So the motion adjourned. Everybody, all those in favor? Aye.